Everybody ready? Ready? All right. Call back to order this October 8th, 2019 meeting of the Sacramento County Board of Supervisors. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Supervisors Frost?
Here.
Peters?
Here.
Cerna?
Here.
Kennedy?
Here.
And you have a quorum. Okay, for item 43, you are acting as the Sacramento County Tobacco Securitization Corporation. Approval of previous meeting minutes, adopt fiscal year 2019-20 budget, presentation of fiscal year 2018-19 audited financial reports, and adopt a resolution setting subsequent meetings.
Good afternoon, directors. Colin Bettis, the County Debt Officer. Prior resolutions of the Tobacco Securitization Authority and the Tobacco Securitization Corporation require an annual meeting that shall occur on the first Tuesday of October. Since there was no Board of Supervisor meeting scheduled on the first Tuesday of the month, this meeting will meet the annual requirement for the Tobacco Securitization Corporation. There are 4 items before you today. The first is the approval of the minutes of the prior meeting, which was held on September 25th, 2018. Sorry.
That was a perfect staff report. Are there any questions?
Move approval.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. We please vote.
Thank you very much.
Unanimous.
Thank you. That's the way it's done at the
vote.
county, my friend.
Not saying anything this time.
Mr. Chair, do you want to take your nominations?
Yes, we'll take nominations quickly.
Oh, okay, that's item 45.
Ms. Williams.
Thank you, Shirley. Welcome. See you next year.
You, once again, flawless.
Easiest thing I've done all week. Probably all year.
Okay, for item 45, you are continuing to November 19th, the Developmental Disabilities Planning and Advisory Council. Children's Coalition, Mr. Kennedy.
The Chiefs recommend continue to November 5th.
Cordova Community Planning Advisory Council.
Please continue to November 19.
Okay, and Mr. Natoli?
Nominate Maurice Thomas.
I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
Maurice Thomas? I believe that's the
Okay.
incumbent. Is that the incumbent?
Got it. And then continue the remainder to,
To the 22nd. Or go to November, please.
November 5th or 19th?
5th, please. Thanks.
Okay. Disability Advisory Commission.
Chiefs recommend continuing to November 5th.
Natomas Community Planning Advisory Council, Mr. Cerna.
Please continue to November 5th.
Sacramento County Mental Health Board.
For District 1, please continue till the 19th of November.
Okay, and Mr. Natoli.
November 5th, please. Continue.
Sacramento County Youth Commission, Mr. Cerna.
District 1 would like to reappoint Ashley June.
Okay. Sacramento Housing and Redevelopment Commission, Mr. Natoli.
Hold over to October 22nd, please.
Sheriff's Outreach Community Advisory Board, Mr. Cerna.
I'd like to reappoint Flojan Coffer.
Okay, and Mr. Kennedy.
Reappoint Sunny Chung.
Okay, that concludes your nominations.
Thank you. Next item.
Okay, so item 44, let me get to it, is conduct the Truth Act forum pursuant to Government Code Section 7283.1, response to Immigration and Customs Enforcement access to individuals in Sacramento County jails.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Britt Ferguson, Chief Fiscal Officer. As your board knows, Assembly Bill 2792, also known as the Truth Act, requires the governing body of any city or county in which a local law enforcement agency has provided U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, with access to an individual to hold at least one community forum during the year. This is the forum for Sacramento County. Public notice of this forum was provided 30 days in advance as required by law. The purpose of the forum is to provide information to the public about ICE's access to individuals and to receive and consider public comment. The Truth Act does not require that a governing body take any action as a result of the forum, and no specific actions have been agendized for today's meeting. The Truth Act provides that, as part of the forum, the local law enforcement agency may, but is not required to, provide the governing body with data it maintains regarding the number and demographic characteristics of individuals to whom the agency has provided ICE with access, the date ICE access was provided, and whether the ICE access was provided through a hold, transfer, or notification request, or through other means. Sheriff Jones is here, and he will be speaking to your board on this matter. Last year's Truth Act Forum, held on December 17th, 2018, at that meeting, your board requested that the county executive assign staff to work with the American Civil Liberties Union, or ACLU, to gather information from other counties related to the management of ICE-related databases and protocols. Staff reached out to the ACLU of Northern California, who provided some information about ICE-related data collection practices in a number of other counties, and this information is included in the agenda item before you today. Staff also asked the California State Association of Counties, or CSAC, for assistance in reaching out to other counties to collect additional information on ICE-related data collection practices. CSAC surveyed all counties in the state, but only 2 responded. The information they provided is also included with this agenda item. If there are no additional questions for me, I'll turn the matter over to Sheriff Jones.
Thank you. Are there any questions of Mr. Ferguson? Sheriff.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, thank you for this opportunity. Ms. Evans, a special thanks because we got our PowerPoint in right under the wire, so you're able to get that up. We appreciate that. So as you know, this Truth Act Forum is required of any county that allows access of ICE inside of a facility, which certainly was us during the year of 2018. This will cover the entire year, although it was an interesting year for reasons I'll get into in a moment. It does not require the law enforcement official, him or herself, to be present, but I still think it's important that I present the information and be available for questions should any arise or any follow-up information that the board may require. The presentation itself will be fairly short, so it is broken down into 3 categories: community involvement with ICE, and then ICE within each of our 2 facilities, the Sacramento County, the main jail downtown, and our Rio Casitas Correctional Center out in Elk Grove. So the first section will be the community. Oh wait, I have to do this, right? It's been a little while since I've been up here. It must have been a while since I've been up here because I keep seeing the same picture of me up here on the paper.
Hello, can you help him? Oh.
There we go. I got it. Thank you. So community activities being the first category. It's the same information as last year. It's important to note that we have no coordinated activities or enforcement with ICE. Whatever they do in our communities, they do so without checking with us or giving us advance notice or asking for, soliciting our help in any way. We never, out in the community, inquire about anyone's immigration status when we respond to a call for service, or if we happen upon any scene for any particular reason, whether someone's a suspect or a victim or a witness. That is also true of folks that get arrested and come to our jail, regardless of which agency is the arresting agency. We never inquire about someone's status when they come into our jail. We do ask where they were born, because there are consular notifications and legal requirements in that regard for folks that are born in a foreign country that have citizenship in another country. But even if they say they were born outside of the country, we never follow up and find out what their status, if they're here legally or not. So we would generally have no idea what percentage of or who in our population is here legally or otherwise. Therefore, we don't track, monitor, or keep stats on folks in our jail that may be undocumented. For our Sacramento County main jail, as you recall, we had a contract in 2018 that expired on June 30th of that year and was not renewed by the Board of Supervisors. In that case. In 2018, the Sacramento County Sheriff's Office received 563 immigration detainers the I-247 form. And while we do accept them and file them, they do not impact in any way the folks' custody status, or more importantly, their ability to be released or otherwise processed through the local judicial system. So as you can see, the holds were entered and immediately canceled out due to the Trust Act of 2014. This may be difficult to see, but ICE interviews, those where ICE themselves came in to interview, to schedule an interview for our inmate population in all of 2018, including the 6 months where we had the ICE contract, was 0 in both of our facilities. We did not have one in either facility. Contrast that with non-ICE law enforcement interviews. These are law enforcement interviews by other agencies, every other law enforcement agency except ICE. As you can see, we're pretty busy scheduling those, but none were for ICE. Now, I will say that during the 6 months that we did have the contract with ICE, it was quite literally an ICE jail within our jail, so they had their own staff and members on site, so we would not know if they encountered those folks and interviewed the folks in their own custody. But if they were outside of the ICE detainee population, or certainly any of our population in the final 6 months of 2018, they would have had to schedule it with us, and none were scheduled.
Excuse me, Sheriff.
Yeah.
Supervisor Cerna.
Thank you. Thanks for being here, Sheriff. So just wanted to get a better understanding of the non-ICE law enforcement interviews. Would an example be like FBI or DOJ or?
All of that. Probation, our own detectives from another agency. We kind of struggle with the language a little bit. We first had SB 54 interviews and non-SB 54 interviews, but it was a little bit unclear to me, so I knew it would be unclear to the folks viewing it. So it's every other law enforcement agency except ICE, the second group. So ICE has no part in those second stats at all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Continue.
And just for reference, in 2017, the main jail had 49 such interviews, and the Rio Cosumnes Correctional Center had 2. On to the Rio Cosumnes Correctional Center. In 2018, there were a total of 384 detainees that were held at the Rio Cosumnes Correctional Center. That was all included in the first 6 months while we had the contract. Obviously, no ICE detainees the second half of the year. Contrasted to 2017, that 384 number was 1,303. The average daily population of ICE detainees while we had them was 121, which is roughly equivalent to the same average daily population while we had them in 2017. I think it was 131 or 134, something like that in 2017. And as I mentioned previously, detainees were housed in our facility only through June 30th when the contract expired and was not renewed by the Board of Supervisors. The demographic breakdown of the detainees for that, again, this is only covering that first 6 months while we had the contract, are as follows. I think those numbers speak for themselves.
I have a question there, Sheriff.
Yes.
So, just so I understand how the process worked, because it sounds like going back, you had very little interaction with ICE, I mean, as far as who the people were, what their circumstances were, right? I mean, that was
Which population are you referring to?
the ICE population.
So the folks that they had, that we were housing under contract, yes.
Okay.
That's correct.
But you did know their race, so at some point you must have done some kind of.
Well, certainly we would have known, yeah, we would have as complete of information from them as we would of any inmate. Yes.
So that information came from ICE. It's not information you gathered.
In which information?
Like this, I'm just talking about this particular slide. This information, you gathered this yourselves as they were being put into the process, or did you get that information from ICE?
Are you talking about the total of 384
No.
and the average daily population?
You had RCCC ICE detainees by race. Yeah.
Yes.
So you got. I guess my point is, I'm trying to figure out how the process worked. Where is the wall between the sheriff's department and ICE? Because you did have some information, but you didn't have other information.
So to be clear, we had all information. So in other words, it's not just a black hole that happens to be run by ICE.
Okay.
We ran it with our own staff. They had unfettered access to their own population, and obviously they were under contract. So we paid per inmate, per detainee, per day, a per diem rate. So, but they're still in our computers, in custody in our jail. So we have every bit of information on those folks as we do of our non-ICE detainees.
Thank you.
They were just under contract, much like some of our state contracts that we house folks with. We have a number of different contracts in corrections. That just was one of them.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
So a bit of a follow-up on this particular slide. Is this a list by race that the federal government gives us, or is this a standardized list of various races that is used widely by all law enforcement?
It's used by the Department of Justice.
Okay, thank you.
Next is just a demographic broken down by the population of male or female, and as you can see, the entire population for the duration that we had ICE detainees was male and no females. And that is that's all the presentation that I had, and I'm happy to answer any questions that I can that you might have.
Are there any questions of the sheriff at this time? Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you.
All right, we do have a number of speaker slips. I have been asked by leadership from the community to provide the first two speakers with 5 minutes each, which I have agreed to, and then the remainder will have our standard 2 minutes. So I will start by calling up Sean Reardon. The clerk can put 5 minutes on the clock.
Afternoon, Supervisors. Thank you for allowing us this additional time to provide some information about some of our concerns with the way the Sheriff's Department is cooperating with ICE in this new legal environment where SB 54 imposes a lot of obligations and creates a lot of prohibitions. I'm going to handle the first part of the presentation on behalf of Sacramento Immigration Coalition. Rhonda Rios-Kravitz will then come up and provide some additional suggestions primarily. I would say when we were here last year, we had almost all questions and no answers. This year, we're at a very different place where we still have a lot of questions, particularly more acute, concerning questions, I would say, about the way that the Sheriff's Department is transferring people to ICE. But we do have some answers as well, and I'm going to try to get into those. We appreciate Sheriff Jones being here, but respectfully, his presentation that there's nothing to see here, I don't think accurately captures what's really going on. So our top line recommendation is that the board institute a prohibition against further cooperation with ICE at the county level. And there are several reasons why. One is that based on the data that the Sheriff's Department provided to the California Attorney General for 2018 transfers to ICE, there are a significant number of possibly illegal transfers and notifications that were made. Second reason is that we have independently verified a number of individual stories of what we are quite certain were illegal transfers. I'll get back to that in a little bit. And finally, the Sheriff's Department policies are confusing and fundamentally inconsistent with the law. And we'll get back to that briefly as well. So we did invite Sheriff Jones to meet with the coalition in a letter dated September 13th. And outlined a lot of our concerns in that letter. We have not been offered the chance to meet with him. The department did respond last Thursday evening, indicating that they thought that they had allayed our concerns by revising their policy. Although, as I'll mention at the end, we don't think they've actually done that. So we still would welcome the opportunity to meet with the Sheriff's Department and Sheriff Jones to discuss these concerns further. So, To get at what's going on here and what should be of great concern to the board, I think we need to talk about two aspects of the California Values Act, SB 54, that are sort of the linchpin of restoring trust between California immigrant communities and law enforcement. And one is this notification rule. Fundamentally, a law enforcement agency in California, the Sacramento Sheriff's Department, is not allowed to notify ICE of when it's releasing somebody unless very specific criteria are met. Those are the criteria set out in section 7285.5. Related to that, the Sheriff's Department is not allowed to transfer anybody to ICE unless the same criteria are met. So the criteria are outlined very specifically, and there ought not to be any confusion about what those are. In part, there's an absolute prohibition against notifying ICE or transferring somebody based on a simple misdemeanor conviction. And we'll get back to why that matters in a moment. Now, the Sheriff's Department provided the Attorney General information that it transferred a number of people based on charges that appear that they might be simple misdemeanors. This is not our interpretation. This is just looking at the penal code provisions that were listed out in the transfer information that the Sheriff's Department provided to the AG and being able to recognize those as simple misdemeanors. So by the Sheriff's own data, it appears that there were likely a number of transfers based on simple misdemeanors in 2018, all of which would have been unlawful under SB 54. We filed a subsequent Public Records Act request on September 24th, seeking additional information to try to get in more detail at what might have been going on there. We have not received a response yet. Okay, one of our big concerns about illegal transfers coming out of this information is that the Sheriff's Department indicated initially that 26 transfers were for people convicted of a misdemeanor DUI. In their email last Thursday, the Sheriff's Department reported that this was an oversight and that those transfers were actually based on a felony DUI statute. Okay, it's a little bit questionable just based on comparing those 26 purported felony transfers to transfer data across the state. For example, Los Angeles County, which has a population 6 times bigger than Sacramento County, had far fewer transfers for the same vehicle code offense. But even taking the Sheriff's Department at its word that that's correct, there's a big mystery. And that's because we verified several transfers in 2018 based on simple misdemeanor DUI convictions. We're continuing to investigate these stories about illegal transfers, but essentially by allowing these programs of notification and transfer to occur without oversight, supervision, or meaningful data collection, apparently, the county is creating conditions where it might have a massive legal liability on its hands in terms of illegal transfers and notifications. And it may be that some of these things are happening in the shadows where, there's an official policy and then there's an informal policy in terms of how things are actually done. And that again, would be really problematic. I know I'm basically out of time, so I'll just note.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks very much for not cutting me off. There's also this issue of the policies themselves inviting violations of SB 54. And again, we'd welcome the opportunity to work with the Sheriff's Department to try to refine those policies. They have not implemented our recommendations, which are exclusively designed to bring the policy into alignment with what the law requires.
Thank you. But before you leave, is there any question from the board?
I have a question.
Yeah. Mr. Cerna?
So you've cited the legislation that the legislative context for this several times. What does SB 54 say specifically about what happens if there's a violation of any element of the statute? What's the recourse?
SB 54 doesn't create explicitly a cause of action to sue, but I know that there are a number of tort claims percolating through the administrative and court process throughout the state, where the people making those claims have said that by being unlawfully transferred, that constitutes several torts under state law that are actionable. There's the bigger issue of if there's a pattern and practice of violating the law, then Obviously, there's the possibility for somebody who's aggrieved by that to file an injunctive relief lawsuit to try to stop that from happening.
And then, in your opinion, is the county then liable then for any civil action that's brought against the sheriff's department?
These actions that have been filed under an administrative tort preservation posture so far, and then that are making their way into the courts, are against the county as well. I don't want to, sort of start getting into what precisely I think the county's liability might be, but it ought to be a concern, in my opinion, for the board.
Thank you.
Supervisor Frost.
I wonder if the sheriff can respond to these, I guess, allegations.
Well, that sounds pretty salacious and scary, but the reality is we've made no illegal notifications. There's nothing operating in the shadows. What he is referring to, which he was corrected on last week, it's a little bit disingenuous for him to come up and say otherwise, was that last year as we were approaching this hearing, we had to get our information on which charges were given custody over to ICE from ICE itself. When we got the list, they were listed as DUI. And so through human error, we inadvertently reported that to the Department of Justice in January as the misdemeanor section of 23-152 of the Vehicle Code, but we went back and checked every single one of them, and they are all in fact under 23-153 or other felony sections of the DUI provisions, which is permissible to communicate with, cooperate with, transfer custody of, whatever you want to say, to ICE. There have been no unverified transfers, either formal or informal, that did not comply with appropriate law. Although he keeps mentioning individual stories and verified accounts, what I am not hearing is anyone specific. If Mr. Reardon has specific examples of folks that he would like me to investigate, believe me, I will investigate it, and I will either report back here, and certainly for my own edification, I will get to the bottom of what is, what did or what did not happen. But just to stand up here and say there are verified and individual documented cases without putting them in the letter so we could actually verify them, and then just to stand up here and allude that there's some cloud of disparaging conduct on the part of the sheriff's office, I don't think is it's either fair, and I certainly don't think it's valid. So if there are verified information, I would ask him or the ACLU to provide that information so we could research it and get an answer for all of us, and not just kind of anecdotal, unverified information. Thank you.
I have one more question for the sheriff. Sheriff Jones, is it legal then, even though the county does not have a contract with ICE, is it legal for you to communicate with ICE?
So there's a couple of different aspects in answering that question. Number one is ICE can be provided with any information that's available publicly. So for example, whether like our database of folks that are in custody is public, folks that are sentenced and have a release date, that information is public, so they can get that information. If it's not available publicly, then they fall into one of two categories, one of which we can communicate with ICE about, one we cannot. So if they fall under the criteria of SB 54, where they are of appropriate crime, either serious or violent, or fit within the enumerated crimes and criteria, then yes, we can communicate with ICE, and that includes notifying them on the release. We can transfer custody of them, and I believe that occurred, I want to say 99 times. I think that's right, but it could be one or two the other way. That occurred with qualifying crimes 99 times in 2018. If it does not fit squarely within the criteria of that legislation, we cannot and do not have any communication with ICE at all. Not about anything, not about their release date, not about, wink, wink, they might be getting out. We absolutely and fully comply with the law. It makes better stories to allege that we don't, and that we're somehow have this sort of backdoor dealing with ICE, but the reality is it just simply isn't true. The confusing policy that he states, the original letter that he had issues and complaints about, referred to our old policy, which was rewritten in June or July for, frankly, it was for clarification and ease of use for our own staff, so they weren't as likely to make inadvertent mistakes, because there are some confusing aspects to the law. We provided a copy of that along with the fact back to Mr. Riordan last week by email and mailed him a hard copy, I believe. But nonetheless, he got it last week, saying that a lot of the concerns that he'd raised relative to our old policy had been addressed in the new policy. Not all of them had, I'll be quite candid, because his reading of what the law requires in terms of a policy is different than mine. So reasonable minds are just going to differ on whether the policy requires things that I don't believe that it does. The one area that I will say that might have some merit that we are going to be looking into is he suggested that we should offer the additional languages of Hmong and Russian. Currently, the statute requires 6 different languages, but it also requires, in addition to that, under 12.8.552 of the Health and Safety Code, any other languages for which the county population of a particular language speaking group is 3,000 or more, or any one zip code within that jurisdiction is 1,000 or more, or any cumulative 2 contiguous zip codes are 1,500 or more. And I would suspect, and we got our original 10 languages for our advisement that we use now, I believe, if I recall correctly, from the Registrar of Voters, because I think it's the same sort of criteria used for how to put out ballots in different languages. But I would suspect, as I stand here without knowing, that my guess is the Russian-speaking population, the Hmong-speaking population both exceed those 3,000 criteria, and of course our census may indicate even more. So, and he has offered to help us with the translation. So, if we will certainly be looking into that in terms of increase in the language availability and making sure that we are complying with that aspect of and being as inclusive with all the languages that the law requires.
And finally, is it safe to assume that someone who's looking from the outside in could actually maybe be making assumptions, but they don't really have, there's a lot going on behind the scenes, information that is not public information that they don't know, that so they could be making assumptions regarding the activities that go on between you and ICE that is not necessarily a good assumption because they don't have the information?
Certainly, but this is obviously a highly charged and political issue, and so oftentimes it's in this arena, it's about controlling the narrative. And as I say quite frequently, that if you resort to emotional appeals and name calling, then facts generally are not on your side. So I'm here to present facts, and I'm happy to work with. I've set them up with my executive staff, my chief of corrections, and certainly I'm happy to meet with them. But frankly, it'd be more productive for them to meet with her and other members of my executive staff that are the boots on the ground, actually doing the work, that can provide the answers that they seek. And I think that we have gone a long way towards taking care of some of the concerns they had. I can almost guarantee you, as I stand here, we will never take care of all of the concerns that they have, because I think the ACLU on this issue and the sheriff's office come from fundamentally different places. But I can assure every one of you standing up here, as they're throwing out the specter of litigation and liability exposure, that we are 100% complying with the Trust Act and the Truth Act and every other piece of legislation that bears any weight of obligation on the sheriff's office and the manner in which we run our corrections.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Supervisor Natoli.
Yeah, I didn't have a question for you, Sheriff. I did want to ask Mr. Reardon something, though. It kind of pertains, so if I could...
You want Mr. Reardon?
Yeah, if I could, Sheriff, I want to ask Mr. Reardon. And it goes to a point that both of you spoke to, but you've indicated, and Sheriff's responded to this about, you said you had verified cases. I gather from what the sheriff has said, you haven't provided either documentation behind that, or so is there some reason that problematic to do that? Because if you have solid verification and he's willing to look into it, then I think that information needs to be shared. I mean, again, I don't know why, if you bring that forward, you wouldn't present that to the sheriff and or his executive staff, and then, and I guess attempt to re-verify it,
Yeah, it's a fair question, Supervisor Natoli, and I think that's something that we'll discuss coming out of this meeting. One concern has been that ICE has engaged in apparent retaliation against people who have spoken out. There was a Truth Act forum in the Central Valley where somebody was arrested within 24 hours of speaking at the forum. So people who have been previously arrested by ICE, released on bonds, and are now trying to keep their head down can be concerned about that kind of thing. But I think we're going to have a conversation about it and figure out if that's something that we can do with the people that we have worked with on this.
Let me just offer a thought, Sean. It may be that, again, through, obviously ACLU, whether you represent those folks or not, through any litigation, but just as you put on the record today, obviously the sheriff is willing to take the information. Mr. Ferguson, in the county exec's office has sought information from other jurisdictions. Maybe there's a way to, again, I think provide some level of assurance that any concerns folks might have that have provided verification that you folks are comfortable with relative to making the statement you made, a way to get that information in a fashion that certainly the sheriff would, honor the confidentiality of it. Obviously, maybe public record behind some of this if there are, offenses and arrests and so forth. But again, I would hope that we could get, the information to the parties that could then view it and then determine, certainly the accuracy as best people can, based upon obviously either, signed statements or, other information that you have available to you and the folks that you've been, that you represent, at least in the sense that you've made the statement here today. So I think that's important for all of us to know. So.
Absolutely, and one other just brief note on that. I mean, I do think the sheriff's department has the ability to undertake its own internal investigations. Sure. Obviously, from our perspective, if there was an objective third-party body, a strong inspector general, for example, that could look into those things, that would also be exceptionally desirable.
Okay. Well, let me ask this then. I mentioned Mr. Ferguson, and he probably doesn't want to be in the middle of the crossfire here, but we don't have an inspector general in place as of yet. But you have been, your offices, Brett, have been helping with gathering information from the last Truth Forum. It may be with regards to this point, because I think it's an important point, you can maybe be the intermediary that helps to, provide the information. Obviously, the sheriff will have to do their own independent verification. But I would ask, since we don't have an IG, either that or maybe through the chair's office to assist in that regard. So particularly on that point, I think it's an important point. So I don't. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right. Rhonda Rios Kravitz, again, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak.
Good afternoon.
Let me see if I know how to work this one. It goes on top, or there it is. First and foremost, I'm here today representing the Sacramento Immigration Coalition, and we believe the County of Sacramento would be better served by a more robust, bright line separating the activities of the Sacramento Sheriff's Office from those of ICE. To that end, we are respectfully submitting 5 recommendations for the Sheriff and 1 for the Board of Supervisors.
Dr. Kravitz, could you pull the left mic down a little bit? There we go, so we can hear you. There we
Better?
go. Thank you.
Is that better?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So regarding recommendation 1, the practice of publicly posting inmate information poses a serious threat to the effectiveness of SB 54's prohibitions on when an LEA, a law enforcement agency, can allow ICE to take custody of an individual. Therefore, we are recommending that the Sacramento Sheriff's Department adopt policy language of the San Francisco Police Department, and that we would say Sacramento Sheriff's Department employees are not authorized to provide the following access or information. And that would be access to inmates in jail, access to computers and or databases, their logs, booking and arrest documents, release dates and times, and home or work contact information. Again, this is a policy already in place in San Francisco. Recommendation 2. This requires ICE to operate with judicial oversight and imposes a greater degree of accountability. We are recommending that they prohibit ICE agents from accessing individuals in county facilities without a criminal warrant or a legitimate law enforcement purpose unrelated to immigration enforcement. This is a policy in San Francisco and in Santa Clara. Recommendation 3, it is much easier for an LEA to receive a judicial warrant or probable cause determination compared to searching the individual's criminal history and ensuring that any convictions match with the criteria of the Trust Act. Operating with judicial oversight imposes a greater degree of accountability. This is the policy of the Los Angeles Police Department. So again, prohibiting all custodial transfers to ICE except when there is a judicial warrant or prior conviction of a federal criminal investigation. Recommendation 4. The primary purpose of a joint task force must be unrelated to immigration enforcement. JTFs carry the potential to result in arrests based on civil immigration violations. Therefore, this is a training recommendation which would require officers who participate in any joint task force to sign an acknowledgement stating that they understand the department's policies in regard to SB 54. It requires such an acknowledgement, encourages individuals to engage and ensure that they actually understand their department's policies and their obligations. It increases accountability in the sense that if an error is made, then the sheriff can hold its officers responsible as they will have formally acknowledged their understanding of their obligations. And 3, it presents an opportunity for the Sheriff's Department to proactively educate officers and encourages the development of transparent and clear policies. Recommendation 5 is really facilitates public transparency and accountability with respect to the Sacramento County Sheriff's Department. This one, the department would disclose through a publicly accessible website on the sheriff's website and on the County Board of Supervisors website on a basis that's consistent with state law the following data: annual reports to the Department of Justice, if applicable, monthly reports reflecting the number of immigration-related transfers to ICE and the offenses justifying the transfer, monthly reports on U visa applications submitted for certification, and the percentage certified by the Sacramento Sheriff's Department, and quarterly reports on the number of civil immigration detainers and criminal enforcement requests received from ICE, as well as in the number of immigrants-related transfers to ICE in an effort to increase transparency and accountability. And this is really important as we do not have an OIG. It's very difficult to get any kind of stats from the Sheriff's Department. And finally, we have one recommendation for the Sacramento County Board of Supervisors, and that one is that we feel is critically important that we create an independent civilian immigrant oversight commission, and this commission would help ensure violations of SB 54 are independently investigated. It would ensure transparency and accountability, and even with an OIG, there remains a need for a high-level body of non-political leaders who are held in high regard by the community. Without subpoena power, this board would be ineffective. So this, we are recommending that it be comprised of 7 commissioners. They would work with the Inspector General to review the issues. This, excuse me while I move this to this one. The Oversight Committee will review the Sacramento Sheriff's Department's compliance with SB 54 and department policies. The Oversight Committee will help ensure violations of SB 54 are independently investigated and reviewed and determine consequences for failing to follow SB 54. It would establish a formalized complaint procedure for immigrants, and the commission will examine how the Sheriff's Department uses county resources on administrative and/or personnel costs involved in tracking and responding to ICE civil immigration detainers, and it would house all data related to immigration enforcement collected by the Sacramento Sheriff's Department. We feel that at a time when the federal administration has been overtly hostile to immigrant communities and has ramped up arrests, detentions, and deportations, it is imperative that the Sacramento County residents are confident that the board and the sheriff are in full compliance with SB 54, and that as a county, we demonstrate with our actions, not just words, that we welcome and protect immigrant rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kravitz. Can you make sure that the clerk we have a copy of that? We do. Thank you very much. Are there any questions, Dr. Kravitz, at this time? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right. And our next speaker is Dr. Rita Cepeda.
Good afternoon.
Welcome.
I'm here, Sacramento allergies.
Here, would you like some water, Dr. Cepeda?
I think I'll be okay, thank you. I'm here on behalf of as a member of the Sacramento Immigration Coalition and as a co-founder of Step Up Sacramento.
Let's not cut into your time with
Okay.
coughing, so we'll just give you some water here. There you go.
On October 5th, 2018, exactly 1 year ago, the Sacramento Immigration Coalition sent a letter to this board. The opening sentence in the letter read as follows, quote, "The Sacramento Immigration Coalition is concerned about the recommendation by Sheriff Jones to remove Rick Brazil from his position as IG in Sacramento. Profound fractures in trust have arisen between the community members, particularly communities of color, and the Sacramento County Police Department," end of quote. Here we are again, 1 year later, and those same profound fractures have only deepened. A situation made more untenable given the current state of distrust and betrayal currently being played out at the national level in the midst of a presidential impeachment inquiry. At the crux of our national disgrace and our local state of affairs are the issues of transparency, balance of power, and yes, whether the citizenry has a right to hold their elected officials accountable. And similar to our national tragedy is the maximum that no one is above the law. On December the 4th, 2018, this body held a meeting similar to this one to look into Sheriff Jones' quote, lockout of County Inspector General Rick Brazil. The sheriff said to you that while he supported such a position, he warned this body not to go too far in trying to provide oversight of an independently selected official. In fact, the sheriff said, and I quote, "An elected official should be free to do the people's business without outside undue influence." I ask you, does this sound like the same script now being followed at the national level? Again, quoting Sheriff Jones on that day, he stated, "I've been described as a rogue authoritarian, a dictator, a mini Trump, and all because I won't allow independent oversight of the sheriff's department. This seems strange to me," he said. "No other sheriff departments in the state has oversight that is being contemplated here." And here's the point of my presentation. In fact, several counties throughout the state have such oversight bodies. The outcome has already proven positive, and the law enforcement work of their officers has not been hampered. In fact, the safety and security of those communities has improved, and dare I say, the trust between community and law enforcement is on the mend. I have here a brochure, I don't have it with me, it's at my chair, from the largest county in California, Los Angeles. They have established a Sheriff Civilian Oversight Commission.
Dr. Cepeda, can you wrap up?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Their motto is working on transparency and accountability, and I should say to you that they have family assistance program, mental health evaluation teams, use of body-worn cameras, cooperation, reviewing policies regarding cooperation with Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and Prison Rape Elimination Act implementation. As Tip O'Neill once said, all politics is local, and that is because we are a microcosm of policy that guide our nation. So I would urge you to consider our request. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. Jareen Miles.
Hi, my name is Shireen Miles. I'm with the Sacramento ACT. I'm a member of the Immigration Coalition, and I have been asked to read a letter from the Jewish Community Relations Council. You should have a copy of it before you.
That, yes.
Good. So basically, the Sacramento Jewish Community Relations Council advocates on behalf of issues of vital importance to the Jewish community in the greater Sacramento area. The organization co-signed a letter September 4th that was sent to Sheriff Jones by a number of allied community organizations regarding the sheriff's compliance with the California Values Act. Since that compliance is the subject of this forum today, we wish to restate the continued urgency for the sheriff and the County Board of Supervisors to address the important issues raised by your community. The September 4th letter detailed a number of recommendations that the Sheriff's Department should follow to resolve potential violations of the California Values Act. The JCRC urges the Sheriff to work with us, community-based organizations, to fully implement all these recommendations as quickly as possible, including eliminating transfers of individuals to Immigration and Customs Enforcement unless they are clearly authorized under SB 54 and related statutes, and revising written department policies and related trainings as detailed in the letter. Most of all, we hope that the county and Sheriff's Department will end their engagement with ICE and the ability of ICE agents to enter county jails immediately. Members of the JCRC, the Jewish Federation of the Sacramento region, and the broader Jewish community would have liked to participate in this important community forum today. However, they were unable to do so in person as they are preparing for the holy and solemn day of Yom Kippur. The organization hereby encourages the board to reference the ADL's calendar of observances for all of the major U.S. faiths when scheduling future events such as this one, which is annual and very important to our community. Yom Kippur is also known as the Day of Repentance, when Jewish people are commanded to reflect and seek forgiveness from others and for God for each transgression or mistake we've committed throughout the last year, and to truly repent by committing to not repeat the offense. We hope that county leaders and the Sheriff's Department commit to ending any involvement with ICE and rebuilding the shattered trust with our community. And that is signed by Bruce Palmer, Chair.
Thank you very much. I'm having trouble reading this, so I'll go with initials, CMP. Is there a Carlos Monte?
Oh, he's not here right now.
Not here, okay.
Sorry.
Good. Did not hear me butcher the name. Kaylin Kipling Mohadadi. Well, don't laugh. I did the best I could.
No, great.
Oh, thank you.
You can't even get close. Okay. I'm Kaylin Kipling Mojedidi. I'm with Sacramento Immigration Coalition, CARE Sacramento, and also the Campaign for Immigrant Detention Reform. And I have a few questions on a very specific thing, and that is we want to address the use of license plate reader technology. That worries us, and it worries the community. The fiscal year 2018 to 2019 budget said that the Sheriff's Department has been working toward actively developing and implementing a comprehensive network of license plate reader technology. In light of that, Sheriff Jones, can you confirm that the Sacramento Sheriff's Department is not sharing this data with ICE or any other DHS agency? This should be able to be answered under the Truth Act.
I'd have to check.
If a board member wants to follow up, but we can't have debate from.
No, that's fine, yes. Okay. I will continue to the second one. Can you change your current policy explicitly stating that your office will not share data with ICE or any other DHS agency? Those are our two main questions regarding that for you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any questions? Okay. Diana Campos?
Good afternoon. My name is Diana Campos, and I'm a community leader representing the Sacramento Immigration Coalition, Sacramento Act, and the faith community. And we are here to ensure that the faith community is heard and that the Sheriff's Department remains accountable and transparent. As a former undocumented resident and DACA recipient in Sacramento, I can honestly say that we are not murderers or rapists. We are a community that is here and that has lived in fear. And I speak from experience when I say that I have lived in fear when driving back and forth home to work or to school. And though I am now a resident in the Sacramento area, many of our families and in the faith community live in this fear when they hear that new license plate readers and technology is being used. So we have the same question to Sheriff Jones. If he has any databases or surveillance data that is shared with ICE, we would like to know. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Courtney Hanson?
Right, we're hanging out all day today.
Yeah.
I do find it ironic that the sheriff wants to accuse attorneys and civil rights advocates of trying to control a narrative while making shows like Jailbirds. And like most things with the sheriff, it looks like we do have more questions than answers. I think it's a great question. Why does the sheriff's office allow ICE agents to access Sacramento County jails for civil immigration purposes when most of these ICE requests are voluntary? I think it's also not a secret to us why he would allow that. We've known for a long time that Sheriff Scott Jones has ties to groups like FAIR, the Federation for American Immigration Reform, which has been documented as a white supremacist and anti-immigrant organization. What we know is that Sheriff Scott Jones thinks humans can be aliens, thinks American equals white. And being in this room is reminding me, this was back in 2011, but I was inside Sacramento County Jail, and I witnessed a young woman being explained in English when she only spoke Spanish that she was being deported. And luckily somebody in my cell was bilingual and was able to translate for her, which I'm not an attorney, but I would imagine that you must have to explain to somebody in their language, especially if it's Spanish, that they're about to be taken away from their 3-year-old son and that they won't have the ability to see him. And that's just something I'll never forget witnessing. And so I'm here today, you know, I'm part of Decarcerate Sacramento. There's clearly ongoing issues in multiple camps with oversight. Oversight should not be seen as a threat. Sheriff Scott Jones should not be so opposed to basic oversight, especially when we see it happen in other counties. Xenophobia and fear-mongering does not need to be part of our public safety here in Sacramento. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Courtney. Sanya Nadadar? Close. I'll take close.
Hi, Sandhya Nadadur on behalf of the California Immigrant Policy Center. CIPC also works very closely with the Sacramento Immigration Coalition. Today, I just wanted to briefly review how the department, the Sacramento Sheriff's Department, fails to comply, echoing a lot of the concerns that have been brought up throughout this forum, and provide recommendations to ensure that all counties in Sacramento, all of Sacramento County, and all communities in this county can continue to thrive. First, the department continues to allow ICE unfettered access to Sacramento County jails. Their current policy states that ICE agents can review an inmate's custody file and have access to the Jail Information Management System to investigate violations of federal law. Under the California Values Act, law enforcement is prohibited from sharing an individual's personal information with federal immigration authorities unless that information is publicly available. Therefore, this information cannot be shared with ICE. Second, the Sacramento Sheriff's Department is actively notifying ICE of California law enforcement telecommunication system hits and immigration warrants, leaving it to ICE to act upon that information. Under the California Values Act, once again, law enforcement agencies are prohibited from using local resources for immigration enforcement purposes. The fact that the department is using staff time and county dollars to notify ICE of people who they think could be of interest goes against state law. We ask that the Sacramento Sheriff's Department share how they screen for protections under SB 54 and the basis for which they transfer individuals into ICE custody. It is vital for the Sacramento Sheriff's Department to track this data and to share it with the public. We request that the department share monthly aggregated data that outlines the number of ICE requests the department receives per month, how the department responded, and the basis for their response. In addition, the department can also share the information related to transfers and participation in joint task forces. When law enforcement agencies are entangled with ICE, it creates a chilling effect, making each of us less safe. For these reasons, we would like to ask the following. 1, a meeting with Sheriff Jones to ask additional questions related to the Sacramento Sheriff's Department involvement with ICE and to share our concerns. And 2, to work with the Sacramento Board of Supervisors to create an oversight mechanism of the Sacramento Sheriff's Department to include the Office of the Inspector General and a Civilian Oversight Commission with subpoena power. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nadador. I have one question. Without going down a rabbit hole of too much because it's beyond this body in this hearing, but so if the provisions of SB 64 are followed
54.
and there's kind of that firewall of what they can and cannot do, does that satisfy your organization, or is there still needed further legislation in your opinion?
There is compliance with SB 54, and then of course we would also request that the department stop transfers to ICE altogether, as this is voluntary, but our first request is compliance with SB 54.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yoshinori Himmel.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Members of the board. I'm Yoshinori Himmel, and thank you for that good reading job on my difficult name.
Japanese is easy.
I would, having heard the dialogue here and the many questions that have been brought up by credible witnesses having to do with the Sheriff Department's practices, I heartily concur with the creation of an independent civilian oversight commission in the area of immigrant treatment with subpoena power, and hope that will be part of the mechanism for oversight of the sheriff in immigration practices. I also think that the five other specific recommendations by the immigration advocates here are generally well taken. I'm not a member of the bodies that have been mentioned. For identification, I'm the president of the Asian Bar Law Foundation. And some of you may have become aware of the programs that we've put on in the last several years, public programs in Sacramento of an educational nature on topics having to do with law and the Asian Pacific Islander community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Himmel, and the Asian Bar does great work in the communities. Thank you. That's the last card I have. Is there anyone in the public that did not turn in a card that would like to speak? Okay. Then we'll bring it back to the board and Supervisor Cerna.
Great, thank you. If my colleagues will indulge me, there were a number of recommendations that were made, and I just wondered if the sheriff wants to respond to any of them, all of them, in terms of willingness or ability to work with the advocates that have raised these concerns and issued these recommendations to implement them or not?
Sure. Obviously, as I stated before, this is a emotionally and oftentimes politically charged issue. I certainly understand and can appreciate that my position on some of these issues are different than some of the folks sitting behind me. Not that either one of ours is not genuinely held. I can certainly appreciate their viewpoint. We just come from different positions. I, as a law enforcement official charged with keeping 1.5 million people safe and trying to do all that I can for that, and then, of course, as for the constituencies that they represent and they're following their passions. I can certainly understand that there will be a disparity of where we are on some of these issues. That being said, I can once again completely assure you that we comply with all facets of the Trust Act, Truth Act, every other piece of legislation. While there were a lot of allegations that we do not, that there were general and specific instances of times that we did not, I would, as I offered previously, I would welcome the opportunity for some specific examples of either generally or policy-wise what we're not doing that gives rise to their belief that we're not complying with the Trust Act, or Truth Act, or specific examples in the case of particular examples of maybe instances where these folks feel that we did not. To that extent, I'm always wide open to get that. I'm not naive enough to think that we do everything perfectly, that we don't make mistakes in human error. But we do need those specifics to look into and to be able to introspect and try and improve ourselves going forward. In response to your other question, I'm perfectly willing to meet with any group that wants to meet with me. As a matter of fact, I had standing meetings with Sacramento ACT in the past for the first several years of my tenure as sheriff. In fact, they were the only group that I had standing meetings with. It became untenable for a couple of reasons, not the least of which is I think there was a complete lack of trust that developed on some specific issues on both of our parts, but more to the point, in my dealing with them, there were some things that I felt they were disingenuous and dishonest about. So I canceled those standing meetings. But I did say in canceling those standing meetings, and I'll reaffirm it today, that I'm more than willing to meet if there are issues that come up that warrant a meeting rather than the standing nature of the meetings. And that goes for any or all the groups behind me. Schedule-wise, it may make more sense, like I said, to delegate some of that to my staff. I can assure you that if that was the case, it would be my executive staff, either my undersheriff and or my chief deputy in charge of corrections or patrol or whatever the particular issue being addressed would be. But certainly I would make my best effort to try and attend some of those meetings. And I would continue to meet as long as I felt they were being productive, but understanding there's going to be a bit of a chasm between what these folks want and what I'm willing to do. For example, keeping ICE completely out of our jail, not turning over anyone to ICE. I'm just unwilling to do that. I can appreciate that that's what they want, but I'm just unwilling to do that. So to the extent that there are things, specific concerns that we can look at, or specific things that maybe we could do better, that while we may be in compliance with the law, perhaps there are things that we could do better from their perspective, more than happy to meet with that, if that answers your question.
It does. I appreciate it, and it's obviously your prerogative to do whatever you think is best and what you want to do and what you want to have your executive team do in response to either the recommendations that have been made here today or in an attempt to delve deeper into understanding specific cases that have been generally referenced to find out more detail. But this is just my opinion now. I think it would probably go a long way, at least to maybe have to kind of restart the conversation to for you to offer, which I think you clearly have, and for the ACLU and others to take you up on the offer to have meetings and to talk about some of these issues. I know it's very difficult in a public setting like this to have a PowerPoint with several slides that have recommendations, A through F, and then expect anyone to come up and give a yes or no answer. But I think this is an opportunity. I mean, we're having this meeting because it's statutorily required, but it doesn't mean that there can't be it can't be used as a springboard to possibly improve the relationship, perhaps even enhance the level of trust. And I think you've been clear about some of the things that, from your personal perspective, your professional perspective, you may be very reluctant to consider. I think they've also equally been very clear about some of the things that, from a principled standpoint, from an ideological standpoint, is very important to them. And I think if some of the ground rules are set early enough, I don't think there's a reason why some of those potential meetings couldn't be productive. So I'd just offer that.
No, I don't disagree. I guess conversely, I do agree with you. And I did verify with my staff, we do not share any LPR data with ICE.
I'm sorry, what was that?
We do not share any LPR data with
License plate readers.
ICE.
Thank you. Supervisor Natoli.
That was going to be my question to you, so you've answered it. But so it just is clear for the audience that we don't share our license plate reader information with ICE, is what you just said, right?
That's correct.
Is there a policy framework behind that, Sheriff Jones? That either
I'm not sure. When it was brought up, I thought in my mind that it was a violation of the law to share such databases with ICE in that context. I don't know if that's true, but that caused me to verify with our with the staff member that would know that, and he verified that, at least insofar as that's concerned, we do not share LPR data with ICE. I don't know if the policy is that it's against the law or not. I just don't know as I stand
but
here.
I was just going to ask you a question, so thank you very much.
Yes.
Okay, any other questions?
Thank you.
Thanks. As I said, I have, this is a public forum. We did turn in the cards. I will, because it is a little unusual. It's not a typical public hearing. So if there is a representative that would like 2 more minutes to come back up, if there's one representative from the organization, I'd be okay with that, and then that will end the hearing. Oh.
Thank you so very much for allowing me to come back. In the rush, I forgot to make clear that there were 2 asks. One is obvious that, as you know, the position of Inspector General has been vacant for a year. The announcement closed on October the 4th, and we would like for you to consider including a member of the community in the selection committee. And then the one other recommendation you've heard over and over again, of course, is the establishment of a Sheriff Civilian Oversight Committee. Thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you very much. All right, that takes us to the end of the public forum. Thank you very much, everybody, for being here. Not only do I appreciate you taking the time for being here, just as importantly, I appreciate the level of civility that we all engaged in this somewhat charged subject matter. Madam Clerk?
All you have left now would be CEO comments,
No comments.
and then the board comments.
There are comments. I know we have an adjournment in a bit. Are there any comments, board members? Ms. Frost? No? Okay. Then I will give my bi-weekly update on the OIG. As was stated, the application process has closed. I believe last I had heard from the consultant, there were 13 applicants, which is a lot better than the first time around. Right now, we are whittling those down, working with the consultant to come up with a number, looking at who would be appropriate to interview, and we will have interviews shortly. So we are still on schedule. We will have an OIG in place by the end of the year.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much, everybody. We're adjourned. Oh, I'm sorry.
Adjournment. Yeah,
we are
adjournment.
adjourned in a moment.
Got an adjournment.
I did say it.
Thank you. So yes, I have an adjournment this afternoon in honor of the late Dr. William H. Lee, who I know many of us knew and worked with over the years. Dr. William H. Lee, founder and publisher of the Sacramento Observer, passed away on Sunday, September 22nd, after a long illness. He was 83. A memorial service to honor his life and legacy was held on October 1st. Dr. Lee was preceded in death by his wife of 52 years, Catherine, who passed away in 2013. Dr. Lee was born in Austin, Texas, moved to Sacramento with his parents and brother in the early 1940s. He grew up in Del Paso Heights and was a graduate of Grant Union High School, Pacer forever. He attended Sacramento State University from 1953 to 1955 and went on to earn a BA degree in accounting from UC Berkeley in 1957. He was awarded an honorary PhD from Southeastern University in 1970. Dr. Lee's commitment to serve others kept him active in civic and educational circles. He was named Alumnus of the Year in 1993 by UC Berkeley's Black Alumni Association. In 1962, at the age of 26, Dr. Lee and two partners launched the Sacramento Observer, an African-American-owned weekly newspaper, and by 1965, Dr. Lee and Catherine became sole owners and started the Lee Publishing Company. The company grew during the 1970s and 80s to publishing at one point 6 distinct publications in California and Nevada, including Los Angeles, San Francisco, Stockton, Solano County, Reno, Nevada, and Sacramento. Throughout the years, under Dr. Lee's leadership, the Observer has been a strong community leader and the catalyst for Sacramento Urban League and the Sacramento Area Black Law Caucus. It was named the nation's top black newspaper 6 times, earning many awards, including the coveted John B. Russwurm Trophy for Journalism Excellence, which is considered to be the Pulitzer Prize in African American newspaper publishing. Dr. Lee's career of more than 50 years as the publisher of the Observer may be the longest tenure of any publisher in California. He took on local, state, and national leadership roles, earning him a reputation for quality and excellence in the publishing industry and as a recognized successful business owner. Over the years, he has been honored by many groups and organizations for his long and dedicated community service and contributions. Dr. Lee is survived by sons William and Larry. Larry, who currently serves as the president and CEO of SacObserver.com, will take over leadership of the Observer. And just on a personal note, I had a chance to attend Dr. Lee's memorial service at St. Paul's last week, along with hundreds of other people that knew and loved him. And you can tell just by the energy in the church that he is going to be sorely missed but never forgotten.
Thank you very much. He was a true gentleman, no question about it, and we will adjourn in the name of Dr. Lee.